What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to Coulee Region Whitetails. In this episode, we're going to be talking about our mounts downstairs. We've had quite a few comments talking about this, so what a better way to showcase it than filming a video. So let's get right into it.
So I guess I'll start off. One of the kind of cool things about our mounts is just the kind of the order that we're going to go in is how we shot them. And so when you're looking at the first one, this buck was shot on one of our properties, and really actually all the bucks until the 2 bucks that we shot this year have all been shot on the same property. So that's kind of a cool thing. But we're really excited to actually add 2 to the wall from a different farm. But this one was shot in, I believe, 2006. It was kind of a cool morning. I got out to the farm to hunt, and it was still dark out, and I could hear this clanking going on up by our family cabin, and I was like, that really sounds like 2 big bucks, going at it up by the cabin. And so I hurried up and got dressed, and I started up the field road, and sure enough, there's these 2 big bucks are fighting just down from our cabin. And as I got closer and closer, they broke up, and one of them came around the cornfield, and I dropped down to one knee and hit the grunt call, and he took off into the cornfield. And the next thing I know, this guy comes around the corner and actually starts walking towards me, and it was still kind of in that light where it was a little bit hard to tell what I was, and so I actually had my bow up in front of me as he was coming closer. And he got to about 20 yards, and I was starting to decide whether or not do I stand up and spook him away, or do I try to pull back and take a shot. And luckily for me, what he did is he actually turned broadside, and as he turned, I drew back, and he looked at me, and I shot, and the arrow hit actually right behind his shoulder, but actually must have hit a rib and deflected back. And as he spun out and took off around the corner of the cornfield, I ran up the field road to come around, and he was standing like 20 yards on the other side of the cornfield, and he just slowly walked up the hill. And so in my excitement, I turned and I actually ran around the hill to try to get into a tree stand on the backside, hoping that I could cut him off, and he never showed up. And so I went back to where I shot him, found blood, marked the spot, and then heading out to the to my parents' place, whatever, to talk to my dad and to see what I should do. And as we were doing that, we actually waited 8 hours and went back, because my dad said, you probably potentially gut shot it, and so you want to give us some time to wait. And so we went back 8 hours later with my uncle and aunt and my dad and I, and we got up on the blood trail, and all we were finding just big spots of blood. And we just kept moving through and got up and finally to the woods. And as we went through the woods, we just had very little blood, and it was actually, I was getting pretty frustrated. And so we spread out in the woods and actually started walking up. And the unfortunate thing is we found him. He was still alive. I had to shoot him again, which to me was a bummer, because like I said, you want to have a quick kill when you're out in the woods, but sometimes that doesn't happen. And for this guy, like I said, it was unfortunate that, for 8 hours, he had to wait for me to come find him and basically finish him. And so he ended up with, he was 22¼ inches wide. He has 13-inch tines, and he scored 163. And so to that point, that was obviously my biggest buck ever, and really kind of what got all this started with putting mounts on the wall. And so we're going to move to the next one over here. The following year, actually, Isaac and I were wandering around looking for sheds, and we actually found this shed actually the same year that I shot him. We found this side, and then I basically combed the entire woods trying to find this, and it took me like two more weeks, and I found this other shed. It was probably 300-400 yards away. So we do have the matching set, and you can kind of see it kind of actually goes pretty close to his sheds, or to actually the actual buck. But this is kind of a cool story. I actually had Isaac, and we were going back to do a little work on a logging road, and I saw this guy with another one that ended up being shot on the backside of the farm. by another gentleman, and I have no idea who he is. But the rumor is the one that was with him was a 12-pointer with double drop tines that scored like 217. So when I actually saw this one with him, it looked like a 2-year-old next to it. It looked like a puppy, and so ended up not seeing him until gun season. And then during the gun season, he came down right away early morning, and I was able to put a good shot on him, and he piled up about 30, 40 yards from me. He ended up scoring 150 as an 8-pointer. He has a 20-inch inside spread. By far the biggest buck I've ever shot with my gun to this date. And so pretty cool looking deer.
I'd also like to add in that we only have, out of all the bucks that we have on our wall, 2 of them have only been shot with a gun. The rest are all archery kills. So that's just a testament to getting out with a bow, spending your time in the tree stand, and being able to have that chance and opportunity to get a big buck with a bow.
Yeah, that's a great point by Isaac. Is one of the things that if I had an opportunity to change what I do, if I had to bow hunt or gun hunt, I would definitely pick bow hunting every day. It's just so fun. I mean, being out, he does an unbelievable job scouting now that he's old enough to drive, and it's really helped us out hunting wise. But like I said, just the drive and the passion to be out there with a bow over a gun is definitely, for me, I just love the fact that we're both bow hunters, and like I say, most of the deer that we have on this wall are all bow kills.
Alright, so we'll move into my first ever deer that I actually shot. So this would be our other gun buck that we have on our wall. So the story kind of behind this one is that year I struggled quite a bit with my bow since I was only 10. I ended up missing quite possibly the biggest buck I will ever see in my life the second time I ever went out, and I ended up passing this buck with my bow to try and shoot that buck, and that buck got shot across the road, and we don't really know how to end that story but that way. And so it was a youth hunt, and it was, I think, the first time my sister's ever been out hunting with me. And we were trying kind of to do our own little videos back then, but they really weren't turning out. And we ended up putting a blind in a cornfield. But to get to this blind, we had to carve a path all the way down this cornfield so we could get in without the deer seeing us. And I really think that's the only way I was able to get this deer, as we were walking back out through the cornfield, because we really couldn't see much in the blind, and we were like, let's just go check. It was a slow night. Go check this other field. And I'm walking down this cornfield and get to the edge, and I kind of tell my sister just to wait. And I step out, and he's standing 12 yards from me. And I've never freehand shot this gun before in my life, but the adrenaline that I got was just so great that I was able to pick the gun up, pull the hammer back, and shoot this deer, and he piled up right away. So that's my first deer I've ever shot with a gun. So now we'll move on to my second deer. So this was my first ever bow kill buck, and it was opening night of the 2011 possibly. We don't know for sure what year, but this was opening night. And fun story with that one is I had a beautiful 8-point come through earlier in that night, and I sent the arrow right over his back at 20 yards. And my grandpa Jim and I, the one that you always see blood trailing with us, he was in the blind with us, and we were like, well, the night's pretty much done. So we were just kind of talking, and I had another arrow on, and I kind of look out, and I'm like, oh, here comes another buck. So I get my bow, and it happened so quick. The buck walked through, saw it was a shooter, drew back, shot him. Just had no time to get excited. And I think that's really a testament to, with the young hunters, we're gonna get excited. Even the older hunters can get excited, but being able to channel when to get excited, and as you hear on a lot of these outdoor shows, slowing the game down, that's a big thing that people gotta take, is just gotta slow the game down. Don't think about oh, it's already dead, walking to me. You gotta make this shot, and I think that's what happened with this buck is I was able to slow the game down and just shot him, and I didn't have enough time to get real excited until afterwards. And he ran 70 yards and expired in the hayfield, and it was all celebrations after that.
So I believe that year would have actually been like 2015 because he was 11, and so he was born in 2004. So let's say on quick math is 2015. Yeah. One of the kind of cool things too is I was actually hunting in a different stand, and he was hunting with my grandpa or my dad, whatever his grandpa, and I actually was trying to film it, and as he shot it, I actually stopped recording because I thought he had missed. And then all of a sudden, I seen the deer pile up, and so when I called my dad to talk to Isaac, they had no idea that it had fallen down because there was just a little bit of a knob, and so the gig was kind of up when I was like, okay, hey, your deer's laying over there, and of course they had to jump out right away and take off and go out there and find it. So that was kind of a neat story. Plus having my dad with him for his first deer kill was pretty cool with the bow. The next deer over here is a 10-pointer that it scored like 143. This is kind of a cool story. We had been out hunting, and one of the things that I was doing, because Isaac was done hunting, was letting him come with me and doing the calling, and he actually grabbed my grunt call, and there's different modes on the grunt call, so you can have it as a mature buck or an immature buck.
So the grunt call we're using is the extinguisher. So it has the 3 modules, like the fawn, doe, and then on the buck you can go as high up as sound like a young fawn buck to a mature 5-6-year-old buck and older.
And so he grabs it and he uses like an immature call, and I just turn around and I'm like, dude, we're here to shoot big bucks. Don't use an immature call. Use a big the dominant buck. And so he hits that thing a couple more times, and I had actually seen a tree just getting, it looked like maybe a squirrel or something that was moving the tree. Well, it ended up being this guy was down behind us, and all of a sudden he started working his way all the way around, and the next thing I know he was actually out in front of me and just raking this tree. And as he stepped out, Isaac's actually back was to the deer, but I told him there's a really nice buck coming out, and it stepped out, and I shot him about 30 yards away in the field. And as he spun out, Isaac is just screaming about this, the biggest buck I've ever seen, and oh my gosh, and it was really awesome. And one of the things I would tell dads is, when you take your young kids with, they're going to make mistakes and they're going to screw things up. But you know what? When they actually make something happen, it's just way more fun. And like I say, that's probably one of the most memorable bucks that I've ever shot, just because he's actually the one that called it in. And I was able to make a good shot on it, and then we were able to go get it. And again, just a deer that didn't go very far. And so, like I say, a quick, clean kill. And like I say, got to have actually Isaac and my uncle and my cousins with me, with my dad, to go get it. So again, kind of a family affair to go find this deer. And it was pretty exciting with all those guys because of, like I say, just coming up on it and seeing actually how big it was. And like I say, just the whole story behind that buck. So actually, you can see one down here too. This is a gun buck that was another kind of fun one because we'd just gotten the extinguisher call, and so
these 3 bucks were all shot right around the same time frame. So I think that buck was shot the year before. That's okay. 2014. So this buck was shot the same year that I shot that deer. And the story kind of, as it goes, if it's alright if I tell it.
Sure.
So we were sitting there, and he's kind of like, oh, let's mess around with this grunt call. So I'm playing around with it, and I'm grunting, and this buck comes actually walking past where my grandpa, who owns the property, was sitting, and walks right by him, and he actually 5 minutes before got down out of his stand and walked down to our cabin, and he walks by us and walks kind of probably 150 yards past us and keeps going. And so we're kind of like, oh, that's pretty cool. But the whole time, I'm only 10 years old. I'm like, Dad, why didn't you shoot that deer? He's like, you know what? If you can call him back in, we can shoot it. So I grabbed the extinguisher grunt call and let out a nice long, deep grunt. And here comes this deer back, and he's like, well, I guess I gotta shoot it. Shot it 130 yards, and it probably ran 20 yards and piled up with a 243.
So yeah, and it was, like I say, kind of fun because he was actually, we were hunting together, and he was hunting for a doe, and so obviously when the buck came through, it gave me an opportunity to get a shot at a nice buck, and like I say, it's not the biggest buck in the world, but like I say, it was pretty cool to, like I say, have him grunted back in after it actually completely walked away from us. So like I said, to hold up my end of the bargain, I had to shoot it. So again, when you have a kid with you and they do something, like I say, it's not the biggest buck in the world, but like I say, the story and obviously everything behind it was well worth shooting it. So this is another 10-pointer that I shot with a bow. This is kind of a fun one too, because we'd actually, my dad, after retired, worked at the town recycling and dump. Basically, I'll just call it dump. It's way easier to call it that. And so we never really understood why he did it, other than to pass some time. But we gave him a lot of hard time because he seemed like he'd always find like little treasures and stuff and bring them home. And one day he actually found it was basically a goldfish pond. And he's like, hey, do you want this? And I'm like, yeah, what am I gonna do with that thing? And all of a sudden I'm like, heck with it. I'm gonna go and dig a hole in the woods, and I'm gonna put this thing in there. And so we're gonna have a little watering hole. And it was during the rut, and sure enough, this deer comes down to get a drink, and I ended up shooting it. It wasn't one of my better shots in the world of hitting it, but it was hit an artery, thank goodness, and went about 80 yards and crashed down. But again, from my standpoint, it was a bad shot, and so had to go find my dad, because he's the basically our tracking master. And we went back up a few hours later, and he saw the blood, and he's like, this deer didn't go anywhere. And sure enough, like I say, about 80 yards away, and we found it piled up. But again, just a cool story of going through and putting a little bit of extra time in, and like I say, finding a water source for the deer to go into. I know a lot of guys will put them in, and they'll take water up, dump water in. I've never really found the time to do that. I just have Mother Nature fill it up when it rains, and like I say, go from there. But it's definitely something that over the last few years we have noticed that they do come into it, they do use it. They're not very happy because I don't fill it up, so when it's empty, you can hear them pawing on it. And so, like I say, just another trick for people to, if you don't have a lot of water sources close to you, like I say, bury any type of watering hole type thing, plastic, whatever, to get yourself some water near your stand. This one is this one's a kind of a fun story. I'll let Isaac start out with this one.
Alright, so this is a deer that early July we got some pictures of him. They weren't the greatest pictures because he was always either really far away from the camera or he was really close sniffing it. So we didn't really know actually how big this deer was. And so come around like, I think it was like October time, I'm out sitting in a bean field that was just cut because we saw so many deer out there. It's actually, if you go back our first video where Noah and I shot our 2 bucks, that was the exact same stand that this deer made his first appearance in the light. So he kind of came down and he was eating acorns, and he walks out into the field, and I'm like, that is a really big deer. And his dead giveaway were these 2 split brow tines. I'm like, that's the deer that we were questioning to shoot. I'm like, that's a no-doubter. And he ended up walking in the woods 15 yards, and I used the wrong pin and I bounced off his back. And we went back and we looked and we didn't find him, so there was a speck of blood on my arrow, so it was like, this deer is completely fine. We had no doubt that he was going to make it, and I'll let him pick up from there.
Yeah, so in that same night too, Isaac, we kind of do things sometimes at the last minute. So Isaac had a freshman science project that he had to do, And so we actually, before we could actually go look and see how he did, if he hit the deer or not, we actually had to go buy guinea pigs for his science project. And so, you know, it was just a little bit more torture on him because we had to go and get these guinea pigs and then come back and then actually go look and see where he hit it. And like you said, there was definitely no damage and really no blood to say at all. And so we knew the deer was fine. But fast forward then a couple weeks, and I'm out in what I call my kill stand. I've had a lot of good luck there, and actually a number of the bucks that are on the wall I've shot out of that same tree stand, and I try to stay out of it until October. Like the second week of October is typically when the first time I'll actually go to this stand, and I've had really good luck with that. Pretty much from about October 13th, I believe, is when I actually shot this deer, to the 23rd. This stand has been the best stand that I have on the property. But he come down through, and he was actually, there was like 4 or 5 bucks that were out in front of me, and this guy just kept slowly coming to me, and he actually came through to the point where I had just minutes left to be able to shoot. And actually, when I drew back on him, I said, if I can't see my pin, obviously, and you know, I gotta let down. And so as I had my bow back, he had to take another step. And I looked and I was like, okay, I got enough light to be able to see my pin, and shot. And he actually went maybe 35 yards at the most, and piled up. And then, so I knew it was down. And so I got down on the tree stand, knew exactly where he was. I went home, got Donna and Kenna and Isaac and John LaFleur, Noah's dad. And we went back up there, and I didn't tell them, any of those guys, that I knew it was down. And so we got up there, and Kenna over the years has been one of our little bloodhounds too. So she doesn't really like hunting a ton, but she likes trailing. And so we brought her along with, and so I knew where the deer was, and I told her, hey, you know, go up on this logging road, because she was like going up over the hill, and I'm like, hey, you need to come down and just get on the logging road and walk. And as she's walking up, the deer hadn't, you know, been aspired for more than maybe an hour. And so the light hit its eyes and it's glowed, and I just heard kind of go, Dad, I don't think it's dead yet. And so we all started laughing and ended up going over there. And like I said, one of the things that was really cool about it right away that we all got excited for was the double brows. It's just something that is just different. It's a unique buck. And one of the things that I've always told people is, you know, my goal is to shoot bucks that are 150 plus. I mean, that's everybody's goal. But there's a point too where, you know, you start looking for different things and different characteristics in the deer that you shoot. And this one definitely has it. It has a lot of character. It actually, the thing that I just still can't believe is that when Wayne Helming, who does all our mounts, when he talked to me and said, hey, this one scored 163 1/4. He's like, what did your big one score that you shot a number of years ago? I'm like, 163. And I'm like, are you kidding me? That deer is bigger than one that's 22 1/4 inches. And it's really one of those things where you start looking at mass and you start looking at spread. And like they always tell me, you know, spread is one number, where your mass is a bunch of different measurements. And so to date, this is my biggest buck ever at 163 1/4. And if you would have asked me, like, which deer would I shoot if I had the two come through, I would shoot the other one 9 out of 10 times. And so I love wide, I like the tall tines. And like I say, I would have never guessed this was going to score better. But like I said, it's such a cool, unique buck. I'm pretty excited that he missed and gave me the opportunity to shoot it. So.
Alright everybody, so I was going through and editing this video, and it just got way too long, so we're going to have to cut it into 2 parts. So part 1, as you saw, was us talking about our first couple mounts, and part 2 will be us finishing off our mounts and talking about some of our different mounts that we have downstairs, more of our unique mounts. So thank you for watching this part 1 of our basement video, and hope to catch you next time on the second part of the basement video. So thank you for watching Coulee Region Whitetails.